Well, hello there. My name is Dan Skipbound, and I am here once again for the 52 must-see movies and why they matter. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about the classic 1967 Sidney Poitier Rod Steiger film In the Heat of the Night. And with me tonight is Mr. Andrew Cabral. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing well, Dan. Thanks for having me on for this episode because I really like this movie and it's really appropriate. It's the 50th anniversary, and it's also National Classic Film Day when we are shooting this, so it is kind of all coming into a perfect storm, if you will.
Absolutely, it is National Film Classic Film Day. So I'm glad we're doing this episode on such a eventful day. Usually, when I talk about these films, I usually like to get into the cast. But before we get into the cast, I just want to say the reason why we're doing these films is this book right here, The 52 Must-See Movies and Why They Matter, The Essentials by TCM and Robert Osborne. He passed away recently, but he gave me and Andrew and Stephen the inspiration to do this series of videos and talk about classic film and some of these most essential films. And so this is just one of the films in the book, and so we're just going down the line. And so I want to talk about the cast of In the Heat of the Night. This is an interesting cast because you may recognize some of these names. And I'm not talking about Sidney Poitier, who plays Virgil Tibbs, and Rod Steiger, who plays Police Chief Bill Gillespie. I'm talking about some people like this. Scott Wilson, who plays Harvey Oberst. All right, now where do we know Scott Wilson from? I think I might. I'm gonna quiz Andrew here. Anthony James, who plays Ralph. We've seen him in quite a few things as a character actor. We also have William Shallot, who plays the mayor. And then we also have Lenny Gates. He's not as big a character actor today as he was back then. He was in a bunch of stuff back then. We also have Sam Wood, is portrayed by Warren Oates. You may have seen him in a few police dramas, TV shows, such and such like that. So, and then the director is Norman Jewison, and then you can't talk about the cast and the director and whatnot without talking about the person that sings the song. Mr. Quincy Jones himself is the guy that sings the song, and it's such an iconic song. In the heat of the night. I know I'm not a singer.
Yeah. It's actually Ray Charles who does the song, but Quincy Jones does the music for the movie.
All right, so I mixed. All right, I mixed them up. I meant Ray Charles, but I know Quincy Jones did the other music, like the score of the film. So Ray Charles and Quincy Jones, two classic music people, two classic music people. So let's get into the cast. Andrew, do you know the name Scott Wilson? Before we get into Sidney Poitier,
I do know the name Scott Wilson, Dan. He was on The Walking Dead for several seasons.
Got it.
And that's where I knew him from. That's probably where a lot of people know him from. But he's been an actor around for a long time. He's been in a few films. He was in The Last Samurai. He was in Dead Man Walking. He was in the movie Monster, where Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci are in. Yeah, he's been around for a while.
He is unrecognizable in this film because he's so young.
Yeah,
and also Anthony James. You probably know the name Anthony James because this guy has been in everything. I mean, all kinds of stuff as like a bit kind of villain, kind of henchman, kind of a handyman, kind of an oddball character in so many movies and TV shows, and he plays Ralph in the Heat of the Night. Kind of the guy that runs the diner, you know. But let's talk about the main stars, Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger. What are your thoughts about them?
I think Sidney Poitier is one of the greatest actors of all time, certainly greatest African American actors of all time, really a pioneer of African American actors in the film industry, something that is still a struggle today, something that is still being worked on today in many respects. But what is interesting about him is that a lot of people, I think, confused the fact that he had won an Oscar in the 1960s, but it was not for In the Heat of the Night. It was for a film a few years earlier called Lilies of the Field, which is a film that a lot of people don't talk about, but that's where he won his Oscar. I believe he was nominated for In the Heat of the Night, as well as Rod Steiger, who ended up winning the Oscar in a rather stacked category that included one my favorite actor of all time, Paul Newman, for his performance in Cool Hand Luke. So I've always had this almost bias towards Rod Steiger in this movie for taking that Oscar that should have been Paul Newman's, but Rod Steiger does a fantastic job in this film, so I can't really be too upset about that.
Yeah, that category in '67 also had Dustin Hoffman in it.
From The Graduate, which is a film that has been discussed in this series already by you and our friend Steven.
That's right.
So yeah, talk about a year, just an absolute year. And of course, and rounding out that category just that year, it was Spencer Tracy, who had passed away right after he had completed doing work on another great film starring Sidney Poitier as well. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? So that is a hell of a year for movies and a hell of a year for best acting at the Oscars.
Yeah, '67 was a great year for performances in movies, and it was a great year for Sidney Poitier, the gentleman we're talking about playing Virgil Tibbs in the Heat of the Night. Okay, so we start off this film. We got Sam. The police officer Sam. I got his name right here. Sam Wood, played by Warren Oates. He's kind of driving around and he stumbles upon a murder, a dead body, and we get kind of like, I like the music of Ray Charles, and then we get the diner. We get Anthony James as Ralph in the diner, and then we kind of, then we follow Sam Wood around. We get this murder, and of course, he's driving around trying to find the murder victim, and he stumbles upon Mr. Virgil Tibbs sitting in the the bus station, waiting on a bus.
Yeah, it's the train station. Yeah.
Oh, it is a train station. Okay, because he tries to get on a train. He tries to get on a bus at various times in the film, and I got confused if it was the train station or the bus station.
Yeah, there's a scene later on where Rod Steiger is just trying to get him out of town, and he's like, "I'll drive you over to I guess the next town where the bus station is, just to get him out of town." And before Dan goes on, we will be talking about spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film yet, see it. If you don't care about spoilers, then just continue to watch us talk about this movie.
Now, these are all spoiler-filled reviews. This is kind of like, in a lot of ways, a companion to the actual movie. It's like if you were watching the movie and you had a commentary. This is the commentary. You get us as the commentary in a lot of ways. So we get this whole situation where Officer Sam is driving around. He finds Virgil in the train station, and then he's like, "All right, buddy, turn around. You're coming with me." And he basically takes him in, and he's like, "Okay, this is the guy. I found a murderer, a dead body, and this is the guy that did it." Has no clue who the guy is. All he finds in his wallet is a bunch of money in his wallet. I mean, what an auspicious beginning to this film. Our star of the film gets arrested for a murder he didn't have anything to do with, just because he's black. I mean, talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right away in this film, it's obvious what we're dealing with is an extremely racist time period, an extremely racist area of the country. This film is set in Sparta, Mississippi, in the deep South during the 1960s, which was very much the height of racial tensions um, with the whole movement for African American rights and things of that nature. And this film is definitely a social commentary on that. Right away, there was a murder, and the first guy that the first person the officer Sam Wood comes across is this black man, and right away he switches to treat him hostilely right away. Doesn't ask him any questions, doesn't even really pat him down in any way and ask him who he is, where he's from, how to get here, anything like that. Just takes him right into the police station. And come to find out that Virgil Tibbs is a police officer himself from Philadelphia. And once Rod Steiger finds that out, the attitude tends to change a little bit when it comes to at least the way Rod Steiger treats the Virgil Tibbs character. He starts treating him with a little bit more respect for his vocation, for his career, and asks him to help him on this murder case that they have, because the Virgil Tibbs character is supposedly a homicide expert where he's from. And it's very interesting how you see kind of the clashes of different ways that procedure is done when it comes to police work in the film. You know, it's a small town Sparta. They have kind of local guys who are probably used to doing things a lot differently. No one's really there to kind of like, um, up to date them on the new ways in which dead bodies are examined and things of that nature. It's really interesting. You get that whole clash of just the way people investigate things.
Absolutely. And so once we finally meet Bill Gillespie, Police Chief Bill Gillespie, he is very hostile to us, but then he figures it out that he's a police officer from Philadelphia. But then we go into they're chasing somebody. They're chasing somebody. We don't know who they're chasing. We just see this guy running through the woods, and he's running on a bridge, and they're chasing this guy, and they capture the guy. And this whole thing about, well, I don't need your help. You could go back to Philadelphia. All of a sudden, we got the guy. And of course, we know by watching the film, they didn't get the guy, because there's things about the guy that tell us that he wasn't the guy. Yeah, did he have some of the money from Endicott?
Yeah,
Sure.
he had the wallet. He had the man's wallet that would indicate that he saw the body, that he took it off the dead body, and they kind of want this to go away very quickly. They want this to be wrapped up very quickly, because the person that was killed was a very important person in town. He was this wealthy kind of businessman who was going to be building a new factory and is going to be providing all kinds of jobs that were probably needed in this small town. So they really want to find out what happened to this guy right away. So if they could pin it on somebody really quickly, they would want to do that.
Yeah. So they find the money on the guy, and he's like, "No, I came across the body. I saw the wallet, and I was like, wow, this is my lucky day. I grabbed the wallet. Then I realized who it was. I was like, oh shoot, let me start running." The thing is, he's got an alibi. He was at a pool hall playing pool, and he's got pool chalk under his face. Plus, he's a left-handed person, and the way the hit on the guy is, it was a right-handed person that did the hitting. So they figured out between, hemming and hawing with each other, they figure, Gillespie and Virgil, they figure out that they don't get the right guy. So then they have to try to start figuring things out. One thing leads to another, and they end up in the mayor's office. The mayor's like, Mrs. Grant does not want Virgil to leave town. She wants him to work on this case because she knows that he's the guy that can help solve the case, and that she will leave town, which means she's going to take the factory that they're going to put 1,000 jobs, a lot of them black, some white, And that's what's kind of the crux of this situation. This guy was going to be, Mr. Grant was going to bring a factory to town that was going to bring a lot of jobs, but also it's going to be black jobs. So there's some people that did not like that. But she wants her husband's murder solved. And so the mayor tells Gillespie, okay, keep Virgil around. Get this thing done, get it over, and then get him out of town. Virgil goes through the clues, starts checking things out, talks to Mrs. Grant and whatnot, and tries to get some clues from Harvey der Oberst. And he ends up at this Endicott cotton plantation.
Yes.
Where this guy.
Yeah, that is one of the most interesting sequences in this entire film. Just right away, there's this wide shot of them driving onto this plantation. It is a very much an old-fashioned plantation that you would have seen in the Civil War time, in the 1800s. And all you see is all of these African-American African-American workers picking this cotton, very similar to the way slave hands would have picked cotton, 100 years before, or a little more than 100 years before. And it's extremely fascinating just how much of a time capsule that the whole town of Sparta actually is when it comes to their thought processes and their ideas behind how to treat African-American people. Just to backtrack a little bit, Virgil Tibbs is put in prison along with the guy that they have captured and pinned this murder on. And the first thing this man says to him is, "Why are you wearing a white man's clothes?" And it's just shocking of that. You have to put yourself in the time where it's shocking to us that black people and white people couldn't wear the same kind of clothes. Like, just mind-blowing that is a thing. And then when you get up into Endicott's house, like Dan was saying, right away there is this statue on the lawn that is one of the most racist things I think I've seen in a film in a while. And it's someone who it's an African-American statue of a person with a deep shade of black skin, which very much harkens back to the whole blackface era and the way the African-American people were personified in film and entertainment. And this Endicott guy, as Dan's going to get into, is just a flat-out old-school racist. Like, this was a guy that hasn't left the 1850s. I mean, Daniel, take it away. I don't mean to step all over what you're about to say.
And then we get a very powerful scene where Endicott figures out that Virgil is basically questioning him for the murder. And so when he figures this out, he's like, "Oh, who the hell do you think you are?" Slaps him in the face. Boom, right back. Virgil slaps him back. And then he goes to Gillespie and he's like, "Gillespie, what, you're going to let him get away with this?" And he goes, "Get away with what?" And so basically they go off to the car and he gets mad at him. He says, "You better get on the first bus or train out of town. This ain't going to go over so good," whatnot. And of course, then we get this thing. We have the opposite, where Virgil is having the same thoughts that the white people are having, that about him, he's having about them, racist thoughts. And he realizes the mistake he was making, and he goes about his thinking that he was thinking in the wrong way. He instead of using the clues and the evidence to find out who did it, he was using his mind, and he had his mind as prejudiced. And so as the film starts going along, he starts realizing that he has to find the evidence and use the clues to find out what's. And so then we get a very pivotal scene where he decides he's not going to leave town. He convinces Sam Wood to drive him around from the beginning of where Sam was, which was the diner, where we see Ralph, in the diner. So they question Ralph, and they get some things out of Ralph, but then they take the drive. But Gillespie finds out he did not leave town. These two argue on throughout the movie. So they argue, and he convinces them, I need to find out this entire road trip, this whole route that Sam Wood took. And Sam Wood takes him on a drive from here to there and takes him by where the murder is and so forth. And he goes, why did you not go this one direction? Why did you go in a different direction? He says, what do you mean? Oh, I could tell you didn't go the way you normally go. And he convinces him that they figured out that there's a woman that he knows who's running around naked at night. I guess I don't know if she's a woman of the night or a hooker or what she is, but
she's a promiscuous woman who seemingly gets I guess you could say sexual satisfaction out of parading around naked in her kitchen at night with her lights on and the windows open. And in the beginning of the film, Sam drives past that and kind of gawks at her, as I assume many men in that town do. I mean, specifically because I believe the film takes place in the summer and it's very hot, and there's just a lot of heat in this movie, hence the name In the Heat of the Night. But there's also a lot of sexual heat in this movie, and it's kind of encapsulated in that woman who parades around naked. And we come to find out that Sam didn't go down that road because he didn't want her to be gawked at by a black man, essentially. Sidney Poitier's character comes right out and says that. And this gets Sam Wood into it starts making Gillespie believe that the Sam Wood character isn't as honest or telling the truth as he may believe to be. Take it away.
Then we get this man named Purdy, and he's got a woman with him. He's like, I need to talk to Chief Gillespie. Then the guys in the police office like, wait, you got to sign in here. You got to tell us the reason. I can't let anybody know what I'm talking to him about. And, of course, Virgil's there. And eventually he just goes into the office and he starts telling her. And then, like 5 minutes later, Virgil comes in and he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you what's going on with him here, because you damn sure are. To know what you're going to say. And it come to find out that his sister is Dolores Purdy, and she has been raped, or I don't know if raped is the right word. Taken advantage of by Officer Sam Wood, and that she is 16 years old. And
they actually use the word rape in this film, which is really kind of impressive for a film from the 1960s, where you wouldn't hear words like rape or abortion or have films be this sexually overt. In this scene that Dan is describing, when the girl gives her an encounter of the events, she does so with such a contempt and a malice, and she knows what she did. You know what I mean? She understands her sexual powers as a woman, especially in the small town, and the way men look at her, and especially the way Sam Wood looks at her. And what this leads to is Virgil having this Virgil going into the prison and asking the man who was in prison before, where would someone go if they got into some trouble, if they got a girl into some trouble in this town? I mean, the guy makes a great joke, go to the barbershop, get a razor and cut and kill yourself. But then he really asks, what if somebody with money needed to fix a problem? And this is all kind of code for where would you go for an abortion. And because this film came out in 1967, abortion was illegal in the United States. This is before the Supreme Court case Roe versus Wade. So you had to essentially do these what they call back alley abortions and things that were very dangerous, very unsanitary, extremely just not the way you would want these situations to be in. And it's really interesting how they use that in the framework of this film.
All right, and so this is where our main character of Virgil is really getting into some deep water because he's got the Endicott people after him. He sends a bunch of thugs after him. Then we got Purdy, who's like, "How dare you have to sit in on it on this with Chief Gillespie?" And then we also have, now we're starting to figure out, does Ralph have more to do with this story than he's letting on? Because we kind of glossed over Ralph 2 different times. We kind of glossed over Ralph. The one time with Sam Wood was in the diner and they were talking to Ralph, and then at the beginning of the movie, we don't really talk to Ralph that much. But come to find out, Ralph has been paying for the abortion for Dolores Purdy. Ralph gets caught paying for the abortion. So then we got to have to question Ralph a little bit more. And then Virgil gets caught by the thugs that are working for Endicott and Sam Purdy. And he's in the middle of Ralph, who's got a gun, and he's got Dolores with him. They got a gun on him. So he's surrounded by all these people. And of course, we're not going to let our main character get killed by all these bad people. We're going to get him saved by the one guy, basically, that can save him. Even though some shots are fired, some things happen, we get a little bit of violence. Sam Purdy gets shot, but the clues have come out. We figure out what's going on here. They had the murder at a construction site, and they dragged the body to the downtown area. And come to find out, Ralph was promised a job at the new factory, and that he didn't get the job. He wasn't going to get the job, and so if he doesn't get the job, then he's not making the money that he thought he was making. And, this whole thing with getting the abortion, he gets himself in all kinds of deep water. All he has to do is hit the guy over the head, and all his problems are solved.
Yeah, basically his intentions were knock this guy out and pretend that somebody attacked them from the woods. Basically, he just wants this man's money because this is a wealthy man. Ralph probably doesn't make very much money working at that diner, and he needs the money to cover up the pregnancy of this underage girl, because that's not going to look particularly well, especially when she has a very overprotected brother who has this entire posse around him that could probably kill him. So the man was extremely desperate to do what he did, but it ends up, expanding into this whole investigation. And of course, you have kind of a fortunate chance, unfortunate for him that Sidney Poitier's character had to be rolling into town, and that he's a homicide expert, which they probably would have never found him out if the Poitier character was in town. You know what I mean? He probably would have gotten away with it, which is a very interesting kind of what-if scenario. But the film overall really touches on a lot of great themes, like Dan and I have already mentioned, the racism in the film being set in the Deep South. A lot of people don't know this, but they couldn't shoot the film in Mississippi because it was too dangerous. They had to shoot the film in Tennessee, and still Sidney Poitier got death threats. People would come to his hotel to, attack him. He had to sleep with the gun underneath his pillow. He felt like he needed to be that protected. So it was a really seriously scary time if you were an African-American person in the South, whether you were a famous actor or not. They didn't care whether you had won an Oscar. You know what I mean? And you have Rod Steiger, who had been, I wouldn't say a huge star. He had been in a lot of kind of well-known films. I mean, On the Waterfront is where I know him the most, seemingly up until that time. But I mean, he's a fantastic actor. He was also in a film, Dr. Zhivago. He plays a wonderful character in that. But this is a film with great acting, a very interesting story, fantastic themes throughout. And I was telling Dan before we started this that I find myself liking this movie and being engrossed in it every single time I watch it. I mean, it has stood the testament of time, especially with its themes that are really still very relevant today.
Yeah, and I mean, and I don't know, if you recall this, but I was watching a version of the film, and oh God, Ben Mankiewicz said that the film was actually shot in Sparta, Illinois.
Oh.
They changed the name of the city in the movie to Sparta because all the signs and the water tank and all the stuff in Sparta, Illinois, so it could seem like they're in the actual town of Sparta. And so, and that was a kind of little anecdote that I learned from watching the film again.
I don't know why I said Tennessee. All I knew is that the book, the locations are different than in the movie. This movie is based on a book, which a lot of movies are based on. And I believe it was set in South Carolina, I believe the book was. And I believe the Virgil Tibbs character wasn't from Philadelphia. He was from someplace else.
Yeah, the author is John Ball.
Yes.
And one of my, there's little things you're going to see throughout this series of videos that we do, things that are like threads from video to video. And one of my favorite threads is some of the greatest movie quotes of all time, the AFI's greatest movie quotes of all time. And this film has one of those 100 greatest film quotes of all time. Very early in the film, they get a bunch of the police are in there, and they're kind of calling him, what do we say? What do we call you? And he goes, they call me Mr. Tibbs.
Yep.
And that is, I mean, if you
That's
call
the best. Yeah.
That is such a great quote. They call me Mr. Tibbs. And I love it because it really shows that Sidney Poitier he demands some respect. That line of dialogue, gets him to where he demands some respect amongst these police officers that really don't respect him at all. And so, but I just want to say, Andrew, thank you for doing this episode of 50 Must-See Movies and Why They Matter. In the heat of the night.
Yes.
Where can you be found?
Before I say where I can be found, I looked it up, and Sidney Poitier was not nominated for an Oscar for this movie, which is kind of a shock to me. But I just want to correct that from earlier, just because it's something that I think a lot of people don't know. But you can find me on my YouTube channel, Cabzilla at Cabzilla Productions, and you can find me on Twitter, Cabzilla06. And you can also find me probably on Facebook at my name, Andrew Cabral, if you want to look me up there. I'm always kind of posting about movies. But yeah, and I'm glad to be here on Dan's channel. Dan is kind of the mastermind behind this whole thing, so you can thank him for watching all of these videos about classic movies.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And so, I mean, I just want to thank you for saying why you think that In the Heat of the Night is such an essential film, Andrew. I mean, and that's why we do this, because we want to teach people and to impart Robert Osborne's legacy on to other people through us. And that's why this show is why we're doing these shows. You can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest, or at From the Fourth Row. I also do a podcast on Facebook and podcast. Oh God, I can't think of the podcast channel right now. But it's called The Best Damn Movie Show, which is what my YouTube channel is, called The Best Damn Movie Show. Also, we do another show on The Best Damn Movie Show channel called The Top 5 Weekly. We had a little bit of problems this week, and Steven and I ended up doing an episode on Sunday, but oh well, what are you going to do? All right, so for Andrew and myself, good night.